Brothers and sisters, this morning is not ordinary. This is a divine appointment. Before the world speaks, before the noise rises, before the rush of the day tries to claim your mind, God has called you into a sacred moment of alignment. Psalm 120 reminds us that even in distress, even in conflict, even when surrounded by voices that don't reflect truth, we have a place to cry out, a refuge that answers. And today, I believe with everything in me that heaven is leaning in to hear your voice. There is an urgency in the spirit right now. Too many people wake up carrying yesterday's battles into today's assignment. Too many begin their morning under attack, when God designed the morning to be a launch pad of victory. This prayer, this moment is your reset. It is your repositioning. It is your declaration that no weapon formed, no lie spoken, no pressure applied will dictate your destiny. As we step into this time of prayer, I want you to rise in faith. Shake off the heaviness. Release every worry. God is not distant. He is present. He is listening, and He is ready to shift the atmosphere around you. When you pray with conviction, when you call on Him with the authority He has given you, mountains move, clarity comes, and strength ignites. Today, expect heaven to respond. Expect chains to break. Expect God to order your steps with power, precision, and unstoppable favor. The cry of Psalm 120 as a catalyst for divine intervention is far more than a simple expression of distress. It is the moment the human spirit stops wrestling alone and acknowledges the power, presence, and authority of God. In Psalm 120, the psalmist doesn't begin with ease, clarity, or comfort. He begins with a cry that is honest, urgent, and unfiltered. This is not weakness. This is spiritual intelligence. Because the moment you decide to lift your voice toward God, something shifts in the unseen realm. Every cry that reaches heaven disrupts the plans of the enemy, interrupts cycles of confusion, and announces that you refuse to fight battles in your own strength. When the psalmist says, "In my distress I cried unto the Lord, and He heard me," he establishes a pattern for every believer. Distress is not the final state when God is invited into the situation. There is a divine immediacy tied to an honest cry. God responds to truth, raw truth, trembling truth, wary truth, truth that exposes where you really are. The cry of Psalm 120 is a cry that turns direction. It turns the heart away from chaos and toward the one who governs all things. It turns attention away from the lies spoken against you and focuses it on the God who speaks a greater word. It takes your eyes off the people who oppose you and fixes them on the God who delivers you. A cry like this is not passive. It is an act of war. It confronts fear, breaks paralysis, and pulls the atmosphere into alignment with divine power. When the psalmist cried out, he acknowledged something vital. God hears, not occasionally, not partially. God hears with precision. He hears the tone of your spirit. He hears the shaking behind your words. He hears the disappointment you don't know how to articulate. And the moment you believe that heaven is listening, faith rises. It rises because the cry becomes more than emotional release. It becomes a transaction. You are not shouting into the void. You are contacting the throne. You are declaring that you know where your help comes from. You are positioning yourself under divine authority, and anything positioned under divine authority becomes eligible for divine intervention. Psalm 120 teaches that the cry is not just an action, but a strategy. It is a spiritual weapon that disrupts deception. The psalmist cries out because he is surrounded by lying lips and deceitful tongues. This is symbolic of environments, relationships, or atmospheres where false narratives attempt to shape your identity or direction. So many people wake up each day battling lies, lies about their worth, lies about their future, lies about their abilities, lies about their calling. But the cry is the refusal to internalize the false report. The cry is the declaration that no lie will become your truth. When you cry to God, you submit yourself to the higher truth, the eternal truth. The truth that dismantles every counterfeit voice trying to redefine you. This kind of cry carries fire. It pierces the fog of confusion. It calls angels into assignment. It awakens spiritual clarity. It commands your soul back into alignment. This is why the psalmist doesn't whisper, he cries. Because some seasons require volume, not volume of sound, but volume of intensity, volume of surrender, volume of conviction. A cry is not about noise, it is about posture. It is a spiritual stance that says, I cannot stay where I am reaching for where God is. And God responds to that reach. Psalm 120 reveals a pattern of movement. The psalmist cries, and God hears. This hearing is not passive acknowledgement, it is active intervention. God steps into the situation. He steps between you and your adversaries, between you and the lies, between you and the distress. When God hears, he acts. His hearing is the first sign of your deliverance already unfolding. He does not wait for the situation to worsen. He responds the moment faith is released through your cry. This cry also repositions you internally. Distress tries to scatter the heart, divide your focus, and drain your courage. But the cry gathers you. It gathers your thoughts, gathers your spirit, gathers your faith, gathers your resolve. It reminds you that you are not helpless, not abandoned, not voiceless. When you cry to God, you reclaim your spiritual agency. You stop reacting to life and start commanding your atmosphere. You stop absorbing pressure and start releasing faith. You stop accepting defeat and start invoking divine assistance. Psalm 120's cry is a catalyst because it shifts the battle. When you cry to God, the battle leaves your hands and enters His. What was overwhelming to you becomes nothing in His presence. What seemed complicated becomes simple. What felt impossible becomes manageable. The cry transfers weight. It lifts burdens you were never meant to carry. It frees your spirit to rise again. It breaks the silence the enemy relies on. The enemy wants you quiet, discouraged, overwhelmed. But your cry breaks the silence that suffocates victory. This cry also exposes purpose in the pressure. Distress becomes the very doorway through which God demonstrates His strength. The attack becomes evidence that you are positioned for elevation. The opposition becomes proof that something powerful is unfolding around you. This is why the cry matters. It is the bridge between where you are and where God is taking you. It is the spiritual signal that activates movement, angelic assistance, and divine strategy. Rejecting the weight of yesterday to embrace today's assignment begins with recognizing that the human spirit was never designed to live anchored to what has already passed. Yesterday may hold memories, victories, disappointments, failures, or unspoken battles, but it is not the place where destiny unfolds. Too often people step into the morning carrying the heaviness of unresolved emotions, old conversations, lingering guilt, or the echo of someone's hurtful words. These shadows become silent burdens that distract, discourage, and delay the purpose that God has assigned for the new day. Rejecting the weight of yesterday is not denial. It is spiritual discipline. It is the act of choosing alignment over attachment, choosing purpose over pain, choosing divine instruction over the replay of old mental tapes. Every morning presents a divine reset, a holy opportunity to rewrite the direction of your thoughts and intentions. But you cannot embrace today if your hands are full of yesterday's fragments. So many wake up with heaviness in their chest, not because the new day is burdensome, but because the residue of what happened before has not been released. God offers fresh mercy every morning, yet many bypass that mercy because they are too busy reliving what God has already forgiven or trying to fix what God has already removed from their path. To reject yesterday is to refuse to let stale emotions contaminate fresh opportunities. It is the decision to walk free, uncluttered, and spiritually available. Embracing today's assignment requires a level of internal cleansing. You must clear the mental clutter that stands between you and divine clarity. Yesterday's stress, yesterday's misunderstandings, yesterday's mistakes, these form spiritual fog when carried into the present. They make it hard to hear God's direction, to recognize open doors, or to receive the strength needed for the day. God speaks to those who are attentive, not to those entangled. He pours wisdom into minds that are still, not minds weighed down with emotional chaos. The ability to embrace the assignment of the day requires spiritual lightness. You cannot walk with authority when you are dragging chains of memory. You cannot command victory when your mind is stuck replaying defeat. Rejecting the weight of yesterday also involves refusing to identify with past versions of yourself. Many people wake up each day, but live as if they are still in an older season. They operate from outdated mindsets, old insecurities, and expired limitations. But every day carries a renewed identity, a spiritual upgrade. God doesn't call you according to who you were. He calls you according to who you are becoming. Yet if you measure yourself by yesterday's failures or yesterday's fears, you will shrink in the face of today's opportunities. The assignment God has given you today may require boldness you didn't have last year, clarity you lacked last month, or confidence you didn't feel yesterday. But every new morning comes with the grace to step into a higher version of yourself. Releasing yesterday also means refusing to let old conflicts govern your present attitude. Interpersonal wounds, misunderstandings, broken relationships, they leave emotional residue that clings to the spirit. But the new day does not belong to those memories. The new day belongs to the plans of God. When you carry old conflict into the morning, you give the enemy access to your focus. You allow your energy to be drained by what is behind you instead of invested in what is before you. Spiritual maturity is not pretending hurt never happened. It is deciding that hurt will not define how you move today. You are not required to carry forward the emotional debts of others. You are required to steward the purpose God placed in your hands. The weight of yesterday also disguises itself as unnecessary guilt and false responsibility. Many carry regrets about decisions they cannot undo, conversations they cannot retract, or seasons they wish they had handled differently. But regret is a thief. It steals present strength by chaining it to past moments. God does not empower regret. He empowers repentance and forward movement. When you wake up, you must make a conscious choice to let grace speak louder than guilt. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to outgrow who you were. The assignment of today requires a mind that believes God has not disqualified you. Embracing the new day means stepping into your spiritual authority. Each morning, there is a divine assignment, something you are meant to accomplish, influence, pray for, build, or break. But you cannot recognize your assignment if your spirit is still entangled with yesterday's emotions. Your assignment may be subtle or significant. It may be a conversation, a decision, a moment of obedience, or an act of courage. But when yesterday is too loud, today becomes muted. The enemy wants you stuck in cycles of memory because stuck people cannot fulfill active assignments. Rejecting yesterday also requires a deliberate shift in language. The words you speak can either bind you to the past or propel you into the purpose of the present. When you talk constantly about what went wrong, who hurt you, how heavy yesterday was, you anchor your spirit to what God is trying to free you from. But when you declare, "This is a new day, and God is with me," you activate divine momentum. Your words create the spiritual atmosphere you walk in. Speak like someone who has been released. Think like someone who has been reset. Move like someone who understands that every new dawn is a divine gift. The assignment of today is too precious to be overshadowed by the weight of what was. The new morning carries divine timing, divine encounters, and divine opportunities that require your full presence. Yesterday cannot be changed, but today can be shaped. Yesterday may have held battles, but today holds fresh strength. Yesterday may have carried sorrow, but today carries renewed joy. Rejecting yesterday is not emotional avoidance, it is spiritual warfare. It is the refusal to allow old pain to dull new purpose. Commanding the morning with faith, authority, and bold expectation begins with understanding that the first moments of the day are not casual, they are spiritual gates. What you allow, declare, believe, or tolerate in those early moments sets the tone for everything that follows. When you wake up, you are not simply entering another day. You are stepping onto spiritual ground that must be claimed. You are entering territory that must be spoken over. You are stepping into divine time that must be aligned with heaven's intention. Commanding the morning means refusing to wake up passively and instead choosing to rise with spiritual alertness, knowing that your words, your posture, and your faith have the power to shape the day ahead. Morning is a battleground because it is the moment your mind is most impressionable. The enemy knows that if he can plant fear, stress, distraction, or discouragement at the beginning of your day, then he can weaken your effectiveness for the rest of it. This is why many people wake up with heaviness, sudden anxiety, or unexplained emotional pressure. It is spiritual interference. But commanding the morning means confronting those forces before they gain traction. It means declaring, with authority, that your day will not be governed by fear, chaos, or the residue of yesterday's challenges. It means choosing faith over feeling and truth over emotional turbulence. Faith in the morning is not just belief, it is activation. When you command the morning with faith, you are telling your spirit to rise above natural circumstances. You are reminding yourself that God goes before you, that his plans are good, that his strength is sufficient, and that nothing waiting ahead is beyond his power. Faith is not optimism. Faith is alignment with divine reality. When you speak faith into the morning, you set a spiritual shield over your thoughts. You anchor your emotions in God's promises. You create a foundation that is not easily shaken by unexpected events or negative voices. Authority is essential because the morning is not meant to rule you. You are meant to rule it. Authority comes from knowing who you are in Christ. When you command the morning, you are not begging heaven for strength. You are exercising the strength already given to you. You are taking dominion over your atmosphere. You are silencing any voice that tries to distort your focus. Authority is not loud, but it is firm. It is the calm certainty that your words carry weight in the unseen realm. When you declare peace, peace must stand. When you declare favor, favor moves into position. When you declare protection, angels respond. Authority is claiming the promises of God as legal territory, not vague wishes. Bold expectation is what transforms prayer from routine to breakthrough. Expectation is the engine of spiritual momentum. Without expectation, you may speak words, but your spirit does not rise. Without expectation, you may pray, but you do not anticipate change. But commanding the morning with bold expectation means waking up believing that something good is already in motion. It means expecting answers, expecting clarity, expecting divine appointments, expecting open doors, expecting supernatural assistance. Expectation is the refusal to live in neutral. It is the decision to live with spiritual anticipation, believing that God is actively working in your day before you even take your first step. Commanding the morning also means refusing to hand authority to circumstance. Too many people wake up and check their messages, their emails, their problems, or the news before they check in with God. They let the world dictate their emotional state before the Spirit can establish divine order. But when you command the morning, you choose alignment with heaven before alignment with anything else. You instruct your soul where to stand. You set boundaries for your thoughts. You call forth strength, clarity, and peace. You push back spiritual darkness with the force of your declarations. Your words in the morning serve as spiritual architecture. Every declaration builds a structure in the unseen. When you say, I am strong, you reinforce your spirit. When you say, God is with me, you reinforce your identity. When you say, no weapon formed will prosper, you reinforce your protection. The atmosphere of your day begins to adjust itself around your voice. Heaven responds to faith-filled speech. Angels respond to authoritative speech. Even your own body responds to life-giving speech. This is why commanding the morning is powerful. It engages every level of your being. Commanding the morning also reshapes your perception of challenges. When you start with authority, problems lose the power to intimidate you. You face them from a place of strength rather than anxiety. You handle conflict from a place of wisdom rather than emotion. You make decisions from a place of clarity rather than confusion. Commanding the morning builds resilience. It strengthens your inner resolve. It positions you in victory even before battles arise. The morning is also the time when divine strategies are most accessible. When your spirit is quiet and your heart is open, God can give instructions, warnings, ideas, or insights that shape the entire course of your day. But if you rush into the day without commanding it, you may miss the whispers of heaven. Commanding the morning is an act of spiritual listening as much as it is speaking. It is telling God, I am available, I am attentive, lead me. And when you create that posture, He responds with guidance that saves time, prevents mistakes, and unlocks opportunities. Commanding the morning with faith, authority, and bold expectation is not just a routine. It is a lifestyle. It is how you protect your purpose. It is how you guard your mind. It is how you anchor your spirit. It is how you collaborate with heaven for the unfolding of your assignment. Disarming spiritual opposition before it takes root begins with recognizing that not every pressure, distraction, or conflict that enters your day is random. Some things are spiritual attempts to drain your strength before you even begin. The enemy works subtly, often planting small seeds, seeds of doubt, irritation, fear, confusion, or insecurity, hoping they will grow throughout the day. If these seeds are not confronted early, they develop into patterns that sabotage focus, distort your peace, and weaken your spiritual authority. Disarming opposition before it forms means refusing to wait until a problem becomes overwhelming. It means confronting spiritual resistance while it is still only a whisper, a thought, a feeling, or an atmosphere. Spiritual opposition often begins in the realm of the mind. A sudden anxious thought, a negative memory, a wave of heaviness, an unexplained discouragement. These are not always natural emotional shifts. They are often the enemy's first attempts to disrupt your alignment with purpose. When you disarm opposition early, you do not allow these thoughts to settle. You challenge them with truth. You confront them with scripture. You silence them by declaring God's promises. What you address early cannot grow roots. What you refuse to entertain cannot influence your decisions. Sometimes opposition comes disguised as distraction. Unexpected messages, unnecessary arguments, interruptions, or sudden emotional triggers can appear right when you are preparing to step into something meaningful. The enemy aims to break your rhythm, redirect your focus, or drain your energy. But when you are spiritually alert, you can identify these distractions for what they are. Disarming distraction is choosing not to engage in what weakens your spirit. It is refusing to pour energy into situations that produce no spiritual or emotional return. When you guard your focus, you guard your strength. And when you guard your strength, spiritual opposition loses its effectiveness. Another form of early opposition is relational tension. A misunderstanding, a sharp word from someone, or an unexpected conflict can poison the atmosphere of your day if left unchecked. The enemy loves to use people's emotions, moods, or reactions to destabilize your peace. But disarming this type of opposition means choosing spiritual maturity over emotional impulse. It means refusing to let someone else's instability become your own. It means responding with calmness, wisdom, and patience rather than reaction. When you maintain your peace, you break the enemy's attempt to escalate small irritations into major emotional battles. There is also opposition that manifests as spiritual heaviness. This is the kind of weight you feel without explanation, a pressure on your chest, a cloud over your mind, a sudden drop in energy. This is not merely physical tiredness. It is spiritual interference. Disarming such heaviness requires speaking life over yourself, declaring freedom over your spirit, worshiping until the atmosphere shifts. Heaviness only grows when it is tolerated. When you refuse to carry it, it breaks. When you lift your voice, the pressure lifts with it. Prayer, praise, and proclamation are weapons that break atmospheres the enemy attempts to build. Disarming spiritual opposition also requires discernment. You must be able to sense when something is spiritual rather than circumstantial. Not every delay is just a delay. Not every confusion is just a lack of clarity. Not every moment of frustration is coincidence. Discernment allows you to recognize the invisible patterns behind visible circumstances. With discernment, you stop fighting symptoms and start addressing the spiritual root. You stop reacting and start taking authority. You stop being blindsided by attacks and start anticipating them before they can form. Authority plays a vital role in disarming opposition. The enemy thrives in places where believers feel powerless. But you are not powerless. You have spiritual jurisdiction over your atmosphere, your thoughts, your home, your day, and your assignment. When you speak with authority, you dismantle the enemy's foothold. When you declare peace, confusion has no ground. When you declare protection, fear cannot linger. When you declare freedom, oppression is forced to retreat. Authority is most effective when used early because the enemy is weakest at the beginning of his attempt. Disarming opposition before it takes root also means being proactive rather than reactive. Too many people wait until stress becomes unbearable, until anxiety becomes overwhelming, until conflict becomes explosive, until frustration becomes paralyzing. But spiritual maturity is about early intervention. As soon as you sense something off, you address it. As soon as you feel your peace shifting, you reclaim it. As soon as a negative thought enters, you cast it down. As soon as the atmosphere feels heavy, you lift your voice. Reaction gives the enemy time to build. Proactivity shuts him down instantly. Your daily spiritual routine is also a form of early disarming. Prayer in the morning strengthens your spirit before opposition appears. Reading scripture anchors your mind before lies attempt to take hold. Praise elevates your atmosphere before heaviness tries to settle. Spiritual discipline is protective armor. It ensures that when the enemy attempts to plant seeds, they fall on soil already filled with light, truth, and strength. Keeping your spirit regulated is another powerful way to disarm opposition. When you maintain emotional balance, spiritual awareness, and inner peace, you create a barrier the enemy struggles to penetrate. Regulation means slowing down your reactions, grounding yourself in truth, and maintaining clarity. Emotional volatility is the enemy's playground. Stability is your shield. The more stable your spirit, the weaker the opposition becomes. Disarming opposition early is ultimately about guarding the purpose of your day. Every assignment, every conversation, every decision carries weight. The enemy knows that if he can disrupt your spirit early, he can influence the rest of your day. But when you are spiritually vigilant, he finds no opening. The day becomes fortified, your spirit becomes steady, your purpose remains clear. Aligning your words, mindset, and atmosphere with God's direction is one of the most powerful disciplines you can develop, because every part of your inner world becomes a channel through which divine instruction flows. When your words agree with God, your thoughts agree with God, and your atmosphere is shaped by the presence of God, you become spiritually positioned for clarity, favor, and breakthrough. Alignment is not accidental, it is intentional. It is the deliberate act of bringing every internal and external influence into harmony with heaven's agenda for your life. It is choosing to speak what God says, think according to His truth, and create an environment where His voice is more dominant than any competing sound. Words are spiritual instruments. They build, break, open, or close doors. They shape outcomes long before circumstances manifest. Too many people speak carelessly, not realizing that their tongue is a steering wheel directing the course of their day. When your words align with God, you are not merely being positive, you are partnering with divine authority. You are reinforcing heaven's plans for you. You are declaring truth over your life until everything around you adjusts. When you declare strength, your spirit rises. When you speak peace, anxiety loosens its grip. When you proclaim favor, opportunities begin aligning. Aligning your words with God means refusing to speak defeat when God has declared victory. It means refusing to speak fear when God has promised protection. It means refusing to repeat the enemy's lies about your identity, your future, or your worth. Your mindset must also come into alignment because the mind is the battlefield where destiny is decided. A misaligned mindset becomes a breeding ground for doubt, insecurity, confusion, and spiritual paralysis. But a mind aligned with God becomes a place of confidence, clarity, and conviction. Alignment begins with what you feed your thoughts. When you meditate on God's truth, your internal narrative shifts. Instead of imagining worst-case scenarios, you begin to anticipate divine outcomes. Instead of rehearsing past failures, you recognize present possibilities. Instead of allowing fear to dominate, you allow faith to speak. The mind aligned with God filters information differently. It is not easily shaken by adversity. It evaluates challenges through the lens of divine power rather than human limitation. Your atmosphere must also reflect the direction of God, because environments either support or sabotage spiritual momentum. The atmosphere around you, your home, your workspace, your morning routine, should be saturated with peace, order, and spiritual clarity. Chaos is not just physical, it is spiritual. An atmosphere filled with noise, distraction, negativity, or emotional clutter becomes fertile ground for spiritual interference. But when you intentionally cultivate an atmosphere of worship, gratitude, and prayer, you create a space where God's presence is welcomed and exalted. Atmosphere matters because your spirit absorbs what surrounds it. A peaceful atmosphere stabilizes you. A faith-filled atmosphere energizes you. A God-centered atmosphere sharpens your discernment. Aligning with God's direction also means being sensitive to His promptings. God speaks not only through Scripture, but through impressions, gentle nudges, inner warnings, and sudden clarity. When your words, thoughts, and environment are aligned, you become more receptive to these divine cues. You notice when God is redirecting you. You sense when He is telling you to pause or move. You recognize when something does not belong in your spirit. Alignment produces spiritual sensitivity, and spiritual sensitivity produces spiritual accuracy. Another dimension of alignment is consistency. You cannot align with God occasionally and expect daily victory. Alignment must become a lifestyle. It is practiced in the morning, reinforced throughout the day, and guarded at night. Consistent alignment weakens the enemy's foothold. It prevents emotional drift. It keeps you anchored in purpose. When you consistently speak truth, think truth, and surround yourself with truth, the enemy loses the capacity to deceive you. He may whisper, but you will not believe him. He may attack, but you will not crumble. He may attempt to distract, but you will not detour. Alignment also empowers your decisions. When your inner world is synchronized with God, you make choices from a place of clarity rather than confusion. You recognize which opportunities are divine and which are traps. You sense which relationships cultivate growth and which drain your spirit. You understand when to act, when to wait, and when to walk away. Misalignment breeds rushed decisions, but alignment births wise decisions. Clarity is not accidental. It is the fruit of a harmonized spirit. Aligning with God also transforms your emotional life. You begin to feel differently because you process life differently. Anxiety loses ground. Hopelessness loses its voice. Emotional volatility decreases because your spirit is anchored. God's direction brings order to your internal world. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. You stop moving from crisis to crisis and begin moving from assignment to assignment. This alignment strengthens your ability to carry out your purpose. When your words, mind, and atmosphere are synchronized with heaven, you become spiritually efficient. Your energy is not wasted on internal battles or external chaos. Your focus sharpens. Your prayers carry more power. Your discernment becomes sharper. You walk with confidence, not because the path is easy, but because the one guiding you is trustworthy. Aligning your words, mindset, and atmosphere with God's direction ultimately creates a spiritual flow in your life. Everything begins to move in the same direction. Your faith, your focus, your decisions, your relationships, your actions. You stop sabotaging yourself with doubt or fear. You stop contradicting your own prayers with negative speech. You stop inviting spiritual interference through unhealthy environments. Alignment becomes the bridge between what God promised and what you experience.